All right. Well, welcome everybody to this webinar from Mike Boyle on Sales Shift 2020. Mike has given a presentation that I've given this presentation before. It's an excellent presentation based on a heap of research around um, the the shifting sales environment for businesses, and I thought it was great if we could get Mike to come along and talk to it. He'll tell you all about himself and his organisation, and also about the great white paper and the research that they've done. So, no further ado, I'll hand over to Mike Boyle, and we're very lucky to have him today. So, thanks very much, Mike.
Thanks, Russell, and thanks, Russell and his team for organising this webinar. I must say it's a new world for us. We're constantly doing webinars now, and we're also consulting and I guess advising nationally into Texas, into the UK and into New Zealand, which 5 years ago I never thought we'd have the technology to do that, but it seems to be pretty active. Sales Shift 2020 is a culmination of, I guess, 25 years of watching salespeople as a voyeur, as a sales manager, as a salesperson, as a trainer, and as a consultant in Banjar Group. Banjar Group is a boutique consulting firm who specialises in sales science. So I guess we like to sort of reverse the myth and the trend that there is no science to selling, when in actual fact we think there is. And there has never been a bigger and growing need for some of that science in organisations that we deal with today. So 2020 came about when we started to see some signs of change around sales. And yes, we've always seen signs of change in business and in other areas, but in sales, we believe this dramatically sped up in the last 3 years. So we think it's an important phase. So Nick Odie and myself, one of the other senior consultants here, we got together and started to put our heads together. Well, what are we going to see in 2020? What will the shape of a sales team be in the future? Where do they need to go? And if you're holding or developing a sales team now, what should you be thinking about? So we started to look at that model, and we put it into the form of the white paper, which was launched internationally in London back in September. So I guess, we think there's a seismic shift happening in sales, and that seismic shifts around a number of areas. The behaviours of salespeople are fundamentally changing, and we start to question, well, why is that? Why do these behaviours that we think have been worthwhile in sales interactions in the past are not sort of working today? And what are the outcomes of sales? What's changed in the outcomes area? We know sales outcomes have changed and results are changing rapidly. But we also started to notice some fundamental shift in structures of sales teams. What was working as an effective structure and what wasn't? How many salespeople do you actually need? That's an even bigger question that we'll try and answer today. And then, of course, the big, I guess, push and the thing that gave it real priority for us is just the lack of effectiveness in sales strategy. Are we getting the results we intend from our sales efforts? Because sales, as some of you will know, if you've got sales teams, is an expensive resource. They take a lot to manage, and it needs some effort. So we started to look deeper at the shift and trying to work out what the real shift was. And in this, we discovered, well, there's been shifts before. And if you think, there's been one in the telecommunications industry, from the humble phone and copper and to the iPhone. I believe basically 6.5 billion people will have a smartphone within the next 3 years. My understanding is nearly 60% of people have one now, and the remaining normal mobile phones will be converted in the next 2 years. So imagine everyone in your consumer base having a smartphone to be able to check pricing, to be able to find information while they walk around a Bunnings or some sort of store. Imagine it in retail, let alone imagine it in sales. So we know there's been shifts before. And in selling, there's only been a couple of shifts. So let's look at the shifts in selling and technique in selling. We know from our research that primarily the first consistent and constant sales process ever seen in the world came out of John R. Patterson and the famous National Cash Register, NCR, back in the 1850s. This was the first time we saw a standard in sales. And that standard evolved around his desire to sell more cash registers after a couple of very poor years. And what the genius of Patterson did was he turned and developed a primer around solving problems, moving from demonstrating to understanding business issues, keeping status quo to finding better ways of doing business. So back in the 1850s, he had the remnants and the first real evidence of solution selling as we know it today. And of course, as he did that, it developed. Then we know back in the 1920s, on the back of James Strong's brilliant work, The Psychology of Salespeople, we know that features and the hunter versus the farmer came about in the 1920s. We started to see more technique in selling, but it's really the only second shift, or the second shift we saw in sales. And then, of course, on the back of the brilliant work by Neil Rackerman and others in the early 60s to the late 70s, where the rise of spin selling and solution selling, we saw the real, what I think, the third real shift. And if you could plot this on a curve, there is no doubt right at the moment we're in the maturity of solution selling and the rise of something different. So they're the three shifts. So when we looked at it, we said, well, the shift's not actually in sales, technique and people. The actual shift's in something else. So where is the pressure building? And I guess what's causing the shift and the pressure? Well, it became pretty obvious as we started to explore as part of this white paper. It's sitting at the customer or consumer angle. Why is it? Why is the customer in such change and such state of flux? Well, clearly we've got a problem with fear. The world is gripped with this VUCA economy, volatile, unpredictable, complex and ambiguous, but there's just a natural fear. And if you've been through an airport lately, you'll know that the constant security checking and the risk factor there amplifies this state of fear. I went through an airport yesterday. This is not me, by the way, but I did go through an airport yesterday, and I asked a gentleman about how many people he's caught with that explosive detector, and he said, not one. He said, and you've been doing some gardening. And I said, probably. So we know that there's massive fear going on in the public. The second factor we saw in consumers and customers, especially in the B2B space, is their ability to understand more about your business. And the salespeople, they're being found out early. That is, people are engaging a buying process before they even meet a salesperson. They're checking you online, they're doing their research. Customers have never ever been so armed with the ability to, I guess, see and understand what it is you offer. So that's a critical point. The next thing we've seen is the rise of what we call the procurement panel, or the committee of decision. So whether you're dealing with a BHP or a Rio Tinto, it doesn't matter, they've got full-time and paid and highly trained procurers. But we're also seeing this, because of the fear, a more committee-style decision-making in organisations and in consumers. So the buying panels are now highly educated, they're there to get the best deal for their organisation. So I wonder how many salespeople have been trained in negotiation skills. We don't see that very often. And of course, there's this, what we like to think is a bit of an oxymoron, there's the lack of time for solution selling. And when I deliver this in a conference or a keynote, I usually ask the crowd how many people have got more time than they ever had, and no one puts up their hand, of course. But then I ask, well, how many people have got a technology that's supposed to help them with time? And everyone says, you know, they had more technology than they've ever had. So when they've got no time, and we're asking our sales teams to do solution selling, which takes time, we're going to run into trouble. And what we're hearing from sales teams is we just don't have time to do in-depth calls, ask the correct and key questions to find needs and develop those needs, as we've always been taught in sales. So there's a problem around this lack of time. We've never been busier with the least amount of time. Lastly, we see the big, I guess, movement is around the lack of talent in sales. I came through a cadetship and was brought on and developed as a salesperson, as you would be a footballer or a pro hockey player or something like that. You come through the junior ranks. We're not seeing that at all at the moment. In fact, there's a very big gap here in the talent of salespeople and what we're going to look at in the future. So we'll cover that in a minute. So I guess this brings us to the real shift. When we looked at all the evidence, what is the real shift? And as organisations, I think you've got to understand this. It's not just about your technique. It's not about the web and how you market yourself, but it's about what we do with customers and how we understand. We call this concept 6 inches wide, 6 miles deep. And this to us is the real shift. The real seismic shift in sales is happening around this model and this, I guess, intersection. When we look at traditional selling was all about introduce the organisation to someone, demonstrate some product, provide some marketing information, some collateral, some story, submit a quotation, persist, inform decision makers, close the sale, and get it done. Underneath the line, very shallow, we did a bit of demonstrating products because we knew our widget or our mousetrap better than anyone else. We persisted and we negotiated on price primarily. So we call this, I guess, a product orientation in traditional selling. There's little customer insight. We didn't have to know a lot about the complexity of customer. We didn't have to know about their business. We didn't see selling as problem solving, as ironically Patterson did in 1850. And the relationship is primarily with the buyer. So it's very wide but very shallow. When we look at selling as we see it going forward, and this is already starting to happen, and some of you online today will already be experiencing this, we have no doubt, there's something different going on. It's very narrow, but it's incredibly deep. So you've got to now define the real challenges and opportunities in a business. You've got to develop and have customer insights. But you've got to develop relationships across those insights with multiple stakeholders, not just the one person. We're finding that success is coming from challenging the assumptions of customers. So they've got lots of information, but they haven't quite made sense of it yet. So how do we challenge? The need to understand the complexity of the business. You can't just skate across the surface and hope to get the deal. And potentially you're going to have to offer unique value or unique insights. And if you can see this, it's like clients work in isolation, narrow window of opportunity, and total immersion in the customer. Now I'm spelling immersion differently there. I'm spelling with an E because we want to really create something around this. I'm going to be a bit controversial and change the English language. But it's all about immersing yourself deep into a customer and working out what they do and why they do it and what challenges they're having to sell and shift your product. So we call this customer orientation, and we believe this has already started, but this will become pervasive in the next 10 years. So the question is your sales team and your organisation ready for the sales shift of 2020? So let's look at sort of the key foundations of this. And by doing that, I'm going to cover off what stays the same, what's going to go away, and what's going to be really newly developed. So what's going to stay the same? Because there's some things that are going to stay the same. The importance of sales will stay the same. It has to. Sales talent has to be involved in this process. We're going to need talented people to sell, and they might be quite different. We need a developed sales process. So a challenge I ask anyone, can you email me today your documented and communicated sales process? If you can't, you've got a problem. Networking will become fundamental. And I'm not talking about social media, which has taken over the limelight of networking. It's going to be deeper than that. You're still going to have to go to the clubs and the tribes and the meetings and associate with your consumer. Sales qualities, sales characteristics, and sales competencies will still remain important. And we've developed a competency model which we use with organisations, and this has become imperative to our training work. What are we going to move away from? So what are we going to say goodbye to? The lone wolves. So we're going to say goodbye to the hand out the window, driving around the countryside, getting a tan on one side of your arm because you're a lone wolf seller. Blind faith in sales. No longer is sales management and therefore boards and executive going to trust sales and say, and hear from sales, it's going all right, boss. We're going to need more than that. So CEOs and leaders are going to have to demand from their sales department more information, better dashboards, and better forecasts. Personality types for sales. There is a common myth that the high-talking, high-energy salesperson is the key. In fact, our studies are saying that it's similar, the opposite. We're seeing a mid-range of more quietly spoken consultative types, not the big talkers. There is a common mistake made of transferring your sales gun, high performer, to sales manager, and this is a major issue. Very rarely do these work because the orientation is different. It's a major issue for organisations today. Managing through pressure and fear. If all you do is manage the numbers and activity and not develop the behaviours of sales, well then when times get tough, this will become a real pressure point for your business. Wrong selling tools and sales training. So we see so much sales training that's just a total waste of time and money, no coaching loop and no proper brief. So just training for the sake of growing sales, it won't work. So what's moving in? What's the new things that are going to happen? Selling in complex environments. Organisations are going to have to get really good at selling in complex environments. Collaboration and sales and marketing. So if you've got a sales and marketing department that work in two different areas, bring them together, break down the walls and get them working together, because they must be sending the same message. There must be a combination of storytelling, of powerful marketing messages, and your why message getting out well. There must be a broad sales capability. It's not just one person selling now. In 2020, we said that there'll be all of organisation sales. Of course, there's going to be sales innovation. We hear a lot about innovation at the moment. Very few know how to do it properly. And what is it when we turn an idea into something that's profitable? That's innovation. So sales innovation is going to be how do we look at solutions differently? How do we do innovation to attract customers and create demand? Coaching culture. I'm interviewing some sales executives at the moment for a sales management job we're filling for a customer, and it's incredible to see that so many of them couldn't even describe a coaching model or a philosophy they believe in. So the development of coaching in our sales management is going to be critical and come rather rapidly. Aligned organisation selling. There is no reason why the person out in the field delivering your product, the production person, the builder, the project manager can't be selling. We don't traditionally see this in our people. We don't give it as part of our role, and we don't have generally cultures that set that. So we need to do that as well. Now to do this and I guess develop this type of thinking, what we call Sales Shift 2020, we use a process called the integral map, which comes from a philosopher and scientist called Ken Wilber, and it's used for all sorts of organisational change. But what we like to think is you've got to develop a sales organisation with the right sales mindset. What's the mindset for selling in your organisation? Is it frowned upon? Is it a dark art, a black art? Or is it something that we believe in and organisationally drive? Then you've got to look at the skill set. And unfortunately, this is where most sales training only focus at the skill set. So what are the skills, the competencies that you're going to need to go forward? What's the tool set? What's the CRM? What's the pipeline? What's the simple sales strategies, the reporting tools, and the processes to drive sales? And lastly, what's the sales culture? What's our values? What's our common goal and vision around these other three things that develops our culture? And when we think about culture, we have to develop a culture that recognises the customer's intent and what they want to achieve out of your supply, service or product. But we also got to recognise what's our internal culture that fulfills that. So that's the integral map for selling. So a couple of key points to work on. Talent and selection. Clearly, we've got to get talent and selection right. It's one of the prime roles of a sales manager to recruit better than you ever have before. If you're missing talent in sales, it'll take you about 6 to 12 months to work out whether something's wrong. It does take some time. So talent and selection is going to be key, and developing that talent is essential. If all we do is give people a page out of a directory, a set of keys to a car, and a call plan, that won't be enough for a modern sales organisation. New characteristics and competencies. We're going to see a number of new characteristics and competencies. We're going to see things like strategic thinking, adaptability, business acumen. Can your people actually deliver business acumen to the customers? Research and investigation skills, change leadership skills. And in characteristics, we're going to see things like self-awareness becoming a competency, boundary spanning, the ability to look beyond common boundaries, learning agility, how well do your people learn and can they learn? And then also, one of the things we're seeing is this ambiguity tolerance. Do your people have the resilience and strength to navigate the hits and hard VUCA world that we're seeing towards 2020? Also a sense of urgency. Urgency is going to become a competency. So these are some of the things we're going to see in the modern salesperson. And I guess we talked about the rise of this new sales model beyond solution selling, which we believe is matured. And I think these competencies and the setting that the customer and consumer is creating for us will see the rise of the business advisor. No longer is there value in talking about your widget or your stuff, your product. It's about how does that add value, how does it solve problems, what's the insight, but what's the challenge? What's the challenge that's going to create a demand for your product based on the problems you've uncovered? It's going to take real business advisors to do that. A dynamic sales methodology. You're going to have a sales process that's not only manageable, consistent, and documented, but it's going to have to be flexible. Does it meet the buying criteria and process of your customers? One of the things we've been doing a lot of as consulting group is mapping sales process for customers, but also mapping the consumer process for buying. So you map it in two ways, and that's created incredible insight for the customers that we've worked with. They had no idea the customers were actually heading towards them in different directions. You've got to have a diverse sales team. Everyone from reception through to delivery, production, distribution has to understand the result, culture, and intent of the sales energy. So what is it we're trying to create from a sales culture? So I'm not saying with this paper, and we documented when we first released it in London officially, that it's time to, kill everything, shut your business down and stop. But what we are saying is you've got to get ready to make the shift. And we are saying that start thinking about it, engage people to advise you on it, or start making the relevant changes. I think the only option you can't undertake is to do nothing around your sales team. So let's look at some of the things you can do as a summary. Look at your product strength, and you can do any sort of exercise, a product portfolio, or we've got an analysis tool in the white paper that you can download around your product saleability. As the saying is, there's no use flogging a dead horse. If you've got no competitive advantage or unique selling proposition in your product, maybe it's the wrong product. So test your product strengths. Evaluate sales talent. So what's the sales talent in your organisation? Don't just train them. Look at them and say, do we actually have the talent here to be a high-performing sales team? You will have people that are good in your team, you'll have people that are rubbish in your team, and you'll have stars. What are the stars? What are they doing? What makes them successful? Mine those, collect those thoughts, collect all those characteristics, and start building a competency model so you can evaluate the rest. Evaluate your team effectively. And following on that, sack fast, recruit slow. I think the days have gone of holding on to a salesman because he's a good bloke and he's done all right in the past, because it just won't work. And if they're not true salespeople, in that they're just order takers, they're going to get found out very quickly. And while this seems harsh, your business relies on having the right talent selling going forward. And if you choose to recruit, make sure you use a proper and thorough process that you own. Don't hand over the strategic intent of recruitment. Take it on yourself and use a good process to do it. Questions. Are we selling? I see lots of organisations that are busy, but they're not sales busy. Are they focusing on the right activities? Are we doing the right things? Do we have the right reporting? and focus on pipeline that we need. Is there a selling culture? You need to question your organisation on this and have a deep look into the department to make sure it's happening. Number 5 is that immersion again. I watched a wonderful film a couple of nights ago about the rise of Nelson Mandela and coming out of jail, and it was all about rugby, and it's called Invictus. And he had to actually work out about rugby because he wanted to make a point about their nation, and if they could win the World Cup, then he could make a huge point about blacks and whites living together. But he knew nothing about rugby, and if you watch the film, you'll see that he immersed himself in rugby and tried to work out how it was. He got a deep understanding so he could use it to his political advantage. This is what we're talking about. You've got to know more about your customers than they do. You've got to know about their structures, their priorities, their business challenges, and that goes beyond selling the widget or your stuff. Sales process. This is absolutely essential. Probably, I reckon 90% of the businesses I work with and meet for the first time don't have a documented and consistent sales process that's understood and followed by the sales team. And more importantly, matches the buying process of their current customer base. It's frightening how poor this is. And so this is a very simple process of getting some butcher's paper up on the wall, mapping it squares, arrows, boxes, circles, mapping out successful sales, mapping out one that you lost, have a look at the gaps, and then start to develop your process. If you look at Formula One, there's a reason why they do 2.9-second pit stops in Albert Park this year, and that's because they know the process and they've refined it and practiced till it works. So get your process right. Develop the skills of your salespeople. And I talked about competencies before, but you're going to have to develop more skills other than just technique, method around sales. It's more than spin and solution selling. It's going to be about what sort of business problem solving skills that they've got. We've just started an executive program with a global brand, and it's primarily all around problem solving. Yes, we're doing a bit of sales technique, but it's primarily problem solving and business acumen, which is quite an incredible shift for our business. So the Sales Shift 2020 paper is available to you. It's just a matter of logging on to our website at Banjar Group, downloading the, clicking on the button on the bottom left-hand corner of our webpage, clicking on and downloading the white paper, and we'll send it straight to you. In the white paper, there's a lot more detail than what I've got here today, but it talks about the things you can do, and it also raises some questions throughout the white paper. It's free to you just by downloading and getting it. And my advice is to get download the white paper, sit down with your team or sit down on your own with a beer and pizza and have a talk about it. What are the effects of the things we're saying in here? Where are you now on it? Where do you want to be in a couple of years' time? And start working a process towards that. So, Russell, before I summarise, and I can't see the questions at the moment if there is any, so you might want to just jump in again and filter any questions if there are any.
Yeah. Mike, can you, people are just typing in some questions now. Can you just repeat the website slowly again for people, please, mate?
Yeah, so the website's www.banjargroup.
Spell it, mate.
.com.au.
Oh, there it is at the bottom of the slide.
It is at the bottom of the screen. So, is there any questions? Happy to field some questions if people want to hang around and ask some questions. Happy to go with it. The only thing is I can't see them on the screen at the moment.
Okay, so a question from Kate says, with the recruitment slow process, would you not recommend an employment agency or a headhunter?
Ah, Kate, what a fantastic question. Now, I'll reveal my hand here. We have started a process of developing what we call a recruitment process for salespeople. We have been doing it quietly this year. We have a belief around recruitment that it shouldn't be strategically handed over or put out to someone. we believe that you should own the strategic intent of hiring. Then you out-task the processes that you don't feel comfortable with. So the first step in that is mapping a good process, understanding the bits and pieces of good recruitment, and then searching for people that can help you or guide you on that. In our opinion, modern recruiting is not fitting that bill at the moment. And this will be contentious if there's recruiters listening, no doubt, because I'm having robust discussions with them at the moment. But I guess I base that on all my clients are saying to me, we're not enjoying this process. It doesn't seem to be finding the talent. Can you help us? So obviously we've been helping our customers do that. And all we use is a process, but we give back control of the strategic intent of recruitment to the customer. So if we say to our customers, here's a good process, do you agree? And they say yes. And we say, which bits do you want to do and which bits do you want help with the sales science? And we generally do those bits. So happy to talk to you offline on that, Kate, but I think recruitment personally, it's a personal opinion of mine, is that it completely lost its way strategically, and I think that's a real challenge. That's why they can't find the talent. So I hope that answers the question for you, but happy to have a discussion offline with you on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Another question from Bill here. I might sorry, that's what it says here. What about the impact of competitors, the role of competitor orientation?
More information, Bill.
He says here, it can be a complex issue. Part of market orientation consists of customer orientation, computer orientation, and being able to use this information.
Okay, well, look, I think there's no doubt when we focused this white paper, it was on B2B, so B2B selling primarily, because the retail sector is pretty hard for us to get our heads around. It's so volatile at the moment from a sales and customer service point of view. So we focus on B2B. We focus on the consumer and the sales teams. We did look at a little bit of the competitive. I think there's no doubt you've got to do competitive analysis. And when you look in the white paper, we've got a matrix there around product saleability, and it does talk a little bit about competitive nature. Personally, we try and spend a lot more time on things we can control. We can't really control our competitors, although I think you should be aware of their potential in the market. So some decent mapping and analysis of your competitor activity, knowing what they're up to, is important.
Okay. Mike, Chris O'Connor gave us a comment about the recruiting thing. He said, your comments give credence to the in-house recruiters who have a relationship with the business.
Well, it's a great point, Chris. And one of the things, if I can give you a tip on recruitment, when we do it as an out-tasking service to our customers, we only do that. We put attitude first, fit second, skills third, because you can't train attitude and you can't create fit. You know, if a person fits your culture and your mindset, well, then it'll work. Thus, when we work with customers, we've got a great idea of their fit, so we know what's going to work for them. And then it's all about finding sales attitudes and the basic behaviours of sales cats and sales stars. So that's why whereas I look at most recruiters and they do it the opposite way around. They look at skills first because that gives them the filter, and then they go to behaviours and attitudes, and I just think that's fundamentally flawed in sales. It might work in other areas, but in sales, that's a big no-no. So great comment, Chris.
All right. We don't have any more questions, so if you've got another question, please put it up. Here we go. No. So Kate said she can definitely going to download the white paper from the website. I can highly recommend it, Kate. It's a great paper. I've been pushing it on to lots of my clients and getting great feedback on it. So recommend that everybody downloads Mike's white paper and has a good look at it, because he's just giving you the thing here. Another question here, Mike, from Bill. Where do I find the reference to testing your product strength?
Stick with me, Bill, as I try and find the page. It's in the white paper, I believe. if you look at page 17 of the white paper, it's got product value and what we call a product saleability matrix. So page 17 of the white paper. A really interesting exercise to do with your team on where they think the product is. And of course, you could also do a product portfolio analysis, which is a common tool.
All right. Mike, do you want to do a quick wrap up?
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the start, this is a culmination of 30 years of observation, working with customers, selling myself, being in sales management roles, and then I guess the genius of Nick Odie, who helped pull this together, one of our team members. And it's not a paper to rewrite the rule book. What it is a paper to create a catalyst of thinking in your organisation. So what I'm suggesting is download the paper, read it, understand it, pose some questions back to us if you want to by email, but start talking about this shift with your organisation and especially your sales team, because the shift we're seeing in sales at the moment is probably the most dramatic I've seen in 30 years, and I've been in sales all my life, and I think we're going to see some huge ramifications on sales teams and their effectiveness in the next 2 to 5 years especially, but heading into 2020 it's going to be a big problem. So get the paper, download it at banjogroup.com.au, have a read, pose some questions, start some interaction. You can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and all that. You'll see that on our website, and we put regular updates on our paper and on our blog. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar. We're excited about what this means, and if you've got some challenges and issues, feel free to drop us a line, and we'd love to add some sales science to your business. Thanks, Russell, for organising. Great job on the webinar.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Great work. I certainly know from talking to my clients about this and Mike's white paper, a lot of them are saying we can't wait till 2020, that this is something that they're either fully engaged in moving to now and need to be moving to now. So 2020 is a bit too late for lots of people. They're saying we've got to get there now. So great stuff, Mike. Thanks very much. Thank you everybody for attending today. As I mentioned, we'll put the recording up on the website and we'll send you links to that. So it'll be either on the horticulture next generation website for those of you part of the horticulture industry, or initially on my site, which is SBD Business, and I'm sure Mike will have a link to it as well on his site. So thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in our next webinar, which is next week, and it's on, I've forgotten what it's on, sorry. So it's on digital leadership. Important, sorry, that I went blank. Leadership in the digital community. All right, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.